Our presentation today is on the economic theory of Keynesianism. This theory was developed by John M. Keynes. He was a British economist in the 1930s through the 1940s. He was the main advocate for the use of his theory in the end of the Great Depression. In this presentation, we'll be talking about the modern ideas of the Keynesianism theory. Because much time has passed, the theory that he initially created has been modified over the years, but it still has the same principles that Mr. Keynes developed. Because his ideas were widely used in the second part of the Great Depression, World War II, the post-war economic expansion, and to justify many countries' stimulus plans, John M. Keynes is one of the 100 most influential people in the 20th century.
Keynes's ideas for a country to get out of a recession were, to say the least, extreme. His famous quote, "In the long run we are all dead," proves that point. With this quote, Keynes was saying that we shouldn't worry about the long run because it is irrelevant and won't affect us when we are dead. With the long run out of the way, Keynes focused on the short run and how to get out of a recession as quickly as possible. With y equals c plus g plus I plus nx, there is only one way to boost the economy in the short run. The reason for this is as follows. You cannot rely on consumer spending because during a recession, consumers are more likely to save than spend. You also cannot rely on investment because it will be more risky to invest during a recession, and also the interest rate will not increase, so naturally people will be less likely to invest. Net exports will also not increase because there will be less product produced inside the country, which will reflect negatively on net exports, decreasing it. So the only one left is government spending, and Keynes's idea was to have the government spend all the money they can to get the GDP to increase and raise the country out of the recession in the short run. Keynesianism supporters point to the multiplier effect for support of their argument. Here is why the multiplier effect is a non-factor. This graph involves using current recession level aggregate demand, which is lower than normal, which is by definition a recession. The government spending will shift the aggregate demand to the right, increasing both the price and output level. Then aggregate demand is multiplied because when the government hires someone, let's say to work on a road or bridge, that person will have more money now to put back into the economy, multiplying the aggregate demand, which shifts it to the right again. However, this is counteracted because crowding out occurs. And the reason crowding out occurs is because the government is doing deficit spending, so they are borrowing money from banking institutions, which decreases the supply of loanable funds. This increases the interest rate, and this money could have been used to be invested in businesses, and as we know, investment is included in the national account's identity. So although they increase GDP, they will also decrease it because investment will decrease. This shifts aggregate demand back to the left, eliminating the multiplier effect. Also, you cannot change the long-run aggregate supply just by increasing government spending. We will be showing you why this is true with the following graph. Now, the only way to change the long-run aggregate supply is through physical capital, human capital, natural resources, and technology. Here is the equilibrium price and output level before government spending occurs. Now government spending occurs, which shifts aggregate demand to the right. Just like before, this increases both the equilibrium price and equilibrium output. However, the economy cannot withstand the output above its normal equilibrium, so it will shift back eventually. It does this when people's expectations rise the price level up, again by shifting the aggregate supply curve to the left. This raises the equilibrium price level again, but decreases the equilibrium output back to its normal output, meeting the long-run aggregate supply. So this proves that Keynesianism does not change the long-run aggregate supply. This brings us to our circular cash flow diagram, explaining where the money goes before a recession and then during the recession, using the idea of Keynesianism. You can see we have households and businesses on two separate sides. First, cash goes from the households to businesses with the purchases of products. Then, businesses send money back to the households through wages in exchange for their services. Now we will add government and banking institutions to the mix. First, the households and businesses pay taxes to the governments, as you can see with the arrows here. Also, households will invest their savings in banking institutions, and the banks then use this money to invest in businesses. And the businesses use the money to start or grow bigger, which produces more jobs for households. Now here's when a recession hits. With Keynesianism, the investment that the banks use in businesses now goes directly to the government. The government then uses this money to put the money not only in businesses but also in the pockets of households, reducing the amount of money that goes to the businesses, which results in less money for businesses to grow and less jobs available for households, which will not help the unemployment rate.
Essentially, Keynesianism is like taking money out of your back pocket and putting it into your front pocket, therefore saying you have more money, more or less celebrating because the economy, i.e. your pocketbook, is now better off. The success of Keynesianism is based upon interpretation. There is no way to prove the success or failure of it. There has been no time in history where you can actually look at the data and say this made the economy better, or this was not a good idea, this made it much worse. It all is taking the data that was created and making an interpretation for yourself. Our opinion: excess government spending, which causes a waste of money, will pump more money in the economy and result in spiked inflation. Most economists will agree that heavy inflation is not a good thing. When money is pumped into an economy that is not supposed to be there, the money must be removed in order to stop inflation. Even if the money is removed from the economy before the inflation hits, there are still consequences of excess government spending. Often purchases are made that require ongoing repair, such as bridges and roads. So if the government built these bridges and roads with the money that they did not have, how are they supposed to pay for ongoing repair expenses in the future? They will just have to repeat this Keynesianism money cycle to cover the costs and therefore increasing the government debt. So some might ask, what is the better option to help our economy? Reduce government spending. Stop the money cycle that increases our debt. We must stop spending before we dig ourselves so deep that it is almost impossible to get ourselves out of this debt. Let the economy naturally work back towards equilibrium. We don't believe that Keynesianism is the answer to pull a struggling economy out of recession. Thanks for listening to our presentation.